If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bettle. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital. In this episode of the Vitality Collective podcast, as part of our Essentials series, we're joined by Erika Hoffmaster. Erika is a registered dietitian with 2 decades of experience helping individuals of all ages and backgrounds achieve their health and wellness goals. Erika owns a boutique nutrition and wellness practice based in Santa Barbara, California, where she provides virtual nutrition and health coaching to women and men seeking to improve their metabolic health, navigate body composition goals, combat fatigue, enhance their health span, and prevent chronic disease. Erika treats each client as an individual with a unique story, prioritizing a whole person strategy for health that emphasizes feeling and functioning well in all aspects of life. With a respectful and empathetic approach, Erika simplifies the science of nutrition, empowering her clients to make confident decisions, prioritize themselves, and build strong foundations for lifelong health and well-being. We're really excited to have her on the show today. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast. Today, I'm here with my very special guest, Erika Hoffmaster, where we're going to talk about conscious nutrition. So Erika and I know one another. We were introduced early this year as a part of us forming Vitality Collective. And we were immediately just blown away by Erika's depth of knowledge, her ability to coach very complex concepts and make them super simple for people. And so she just fit right in with our team immediately off the bat. So Erika, thanks so much for joining us today. And we are very excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I just need you to text me every day and pump me up.
That's what we do well. Well, we will try and keep this to an hour. For context,
Okay.
Whenever Michelle and I go for coffee with Erika, it's usually about 5 to 6 hours.
Yeah.
And so we'll try and condense those conversations into a pretty
I'll
simple
try.
flow.
I'll try. Can't promise anything.
All right. Well, we can all have goals. So, one of our pillars with Vitality Collective is conscious nutrition. And we were quite deliberate about why we chose conscious nutrition versus just nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it really spoke to a lot of my experience with the athletes on food and nutrition as a structural, what we're built out of, a fuel. But then also something I've started appreciating more and more is the sort of social, spiritual soul of food, where it's just such a thing that brings joy, connects people in a way that there just not many other things do. Can you speak a little bit to the importance of that view? Because I know it's something that a view that you share. Can you just speak a little bit to the importance of nutrition for vitality versus weight loss?
Yeah. It's really easy for us to kind of go down the deep end of nutrition biochemistry
Mm-hmm.
because that's what it is, right? But in everybody's day-to-day life, it is a very emotional thing. Everyone eats. It's something that we all collectively do. And so it's really personal. And I like to remind clients that when they're trying to better understand nutrition or better understand their health, that there's no black and white in nutrition. And it really is an individualized thing. I know that's sometimes not what people want to hear. They want like actual specific answers. But it's really important to not be dogmatic when it comes to nutrition, which is often very much what's happening out in the world on social media. And so I love what you're doing with Vitality Collective and Conscious Nutrition, because it is a very thoughtful and practical approach um, that's very individualized to each person, which is really necessary for achieving long-term health.
Yeah, that gets us right into, I think, the most controversial topic possible. Right? Way to lead off with that. I think there's so much conflicting information out there, right? And more than I think any other area of health, people are combative about this, right? You got your tribe,
Yeah.
and you're a carnivore, you're a vegan, you're a no carb person, you have carbs. It seems like you've sort of got to pick your tribe and fight it out, right? And you're going to live and die by that one thing that is the solution for everyone. Just because it worked for you, great. This is what everyone should do, right?
Yeah, and that makes it so confusing for everybody, because people are so certain online, and there's nothing to back that certainty. And nutrition's really the only science that this kind of happens to, right?
Mhm.
Like, you don't see people in physics, like studies coming out or things happening, and then everyone's arguing about it online, right? Like, that
Right.
doesn't happen. It's just this nutrition space. And kind of going back and tying that to what I was saying, everyone eats. So
Hmm.
everyone has their own personalized experience with nutrition and food. And so oftentimes people are like, well, this worked for me, I'm going to spread it to the world. And
Hmm.
like I said, they're so certain, and there's nothing to kind of back that. And even if there is some study or science, maybe they don't understand the science well enough, or it's not well-rounded science, or they don't really fully understand physiology. And I'm all for people doing what works for them. I'm not saying that that is wrong. But what bothers me is kind of what you said. It's almost become very like cultish, and you're in your very specific tribe, and people get very closed minded about it. And then that just spreads misinformation and confusion to the masses. And
Right.
in my clinic, in my practice, I see that day to day with specifically women, and not knowing what to do. They are just so beyond confused. Do I eat carbs? Do I not eat carbs? Do I do this? Do I do that? You can find those messages on both sides of almost every topic online in 5 seconds. Um, and so it really becomes very difficult for people to understand and know. And a lot of times that causes people to have inaction, because they are just like, well, none of this matters, I'm just not going to do anything.
Right.
or they start going down a wrong path that then leads them to have an unhealthy relationship with food, or
Hmm.
doesn't really, it might move the needle in a direction that they didn't know they were going to go down, instead of where they really ultimately want to go.
Hmm. I think that really speaks to me, to the difference between strategy and tactics. We've had this conversation before, and I see it across the spectrum, certainly in the fitness industry, um, where people will, for example, people who lift, you'll have your Olympic lifters, and that's the only thing you should do, and you'll have, people who are into their little their philosophy. They'll follow their person who's an expert. Um, Same in nutrition, I think. There are some key things you're trying to achieve with your nutrition. And the tactics are all of these little subgroups that people try and fit into, but they sort of flip those, right?
Oh my
So
gosh, you're so right. Yeah.
can you speak
Yeah.
a little bit to some of those sort of strategies? What are
Hmm.
people on a very basic level trying to achieve with nutrition? When it comes to health, weight loss, performance gains, bone density, all of these outcomes that we're looking for. What are your sort of pillars that sort of transcend all of these different tactics that may be low carb or whatever, one of the others?
Kind of basing off of what you just said, it really matters on getting very clear on your why and your very specific goal. Because even through nutrition, through nutrition, you have to look at things through a different lens depending on that goal. So, I'm going to be doing things very differently with a client who just wants straight up weight loss. I mean, I wouldn't we can dive into why I wouldn't be doing that in the first place, but if someone's just like I just want straight up weight loss, I'm going to be looking at nutrition from a different lens versus someone like a versus a professional athlete versus someone who wants 4% body fat and they want to become a professional bodybuilder versus a perimenopausal woman in her 40s who wants to live a long, healthy life and be around for her grandkids, right? I'm going to be looking at nutrition and different other aspects of health through that lens. And oftentimes people um, don't they don't do that or they don't get clear enough. That's one of the number one things I work with clients and I suggest people do because then when you're very clear on the ultimate goal, it makes the steps to get there a little bit more clear as
Yeah.
well. And that's when we can bring on tactics, right? So if I'm saying, okay, I want to improve health span and longevity, I'm going to be looking at ways to adjust my nutrition very specifically for that versus just straight up weight loss or performance. I mean, they can come together, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm saying. It's the goal first and
Yeah.
really truly understanding your why and where you want to go. Then the tactics can fall into place. And that's where I think a lot of the confusion is online because you're right. Most of what is talked about are tactics.
Hmm.
And so people are like, well, is this good or is this good? Or is this bad? Or should I be doing this or should I not be doing that? And it's frustrating for clients because I'm always
Right.
like, but in what context?
Yeah.
I'll get like, is this food healthy? Well, I don't really know your goals
Hmm.
and I don't know where you are as far as, where you want to go. So
Right.
it's a really hard question to answer.
So
So
I
that's the
think,
number one thing is to get very clear on your
yeah.
direction.
So let's make that a little concrete for people then, because
Mm-hmm.
even as we talk about it, it can be confusing to hear two people who have a lot of knowledge in the space talking about how confusing it is. Right. So
Yeah.
the overwhelming majority of people who want to talk about nutrition want to talk about weight loss.
Yes.
I, in my career, have faced that a lot with athletes, male and female. Either the GM wants this athlete to lose weight, college athletics, working with a lot of female athletes, having conversations about losing weight. I'm sure you have that conversation every day.
Mm-hmm.
What message do we want to give people, first of all, about the goal of losing weight? Because it's a valid goal for people.
Absolutely.
But how do we break that down?
Yeah. And you're right. The majority of the women that are in my practice, that is really their goal that they come to me with is a weight loss goal or some type of body composition shift. And and tying that to what I was just saying, the importance of there's always something behind that, right? Two things can be true at once, right? You can want to feel and look sexy and feel good in your body, but you also want to do it in a healthful way. This is what I'm hearing more so, the type of clients that I'm seeing are women mostly in their 40s or beyond where they're like, okay, I really do want to lose weight, but I want to do it in a healthy way. I want to prevent chronic disease. I want to be around for my grandkids. I don't want to be a burden on family in the future. I want to be functioning in the future. And so that makes the weight loss goal a little bit more clear, because there's different strategies for just straight up weight loss versus doing it in a health promoting way.
Well, and I think the important thing to touch on there, to define what those are, weight loss just being the number on the scale going down, regardless of where that comes from. You had mentioned it a second ago, body composition shift.
Yes.
Right. Explain that a bit to us. What is
Right.
body composition shift versus weight loss?
Weight loss is just you see a number on the scale and you want it to go down, irregardless of what actually is happening internally. So the scale number might be going down, and a lot of people think, oh, that means I'm losing fat. And you could be losing fat, but you're probably most likely also losing muscle mass, water, other things. So it's not just fat loss, weight loss. You're just looking at that number on the scale. And that number really doesn't tell us anything. It's just, okay, yes, your whole volume of your body is coming down. But like I said, that could be fat, that could be muscle, which we can talk about why we want to protect.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and what's the problem with that? So what?
Right. Well, when we talk about, and some people might not care, right? They just want that number to go down on the scale. Most of the women that I'm working with, and you and I have had conversations about with Vitality Collective, is that we want to feel good, but we also want to protect our health in the future.
Yes.
And maintaining muscle mass is crucial for that, and optimizing metabolic health, which we can talk about. But comparing just weight loss to body composition, and I like to call it health promoting body composition changes. This is when we still are prioritizing how we look and feel in our body, because that is the goal for most people, but we're doing it in a way that's also thinking about improving health span and longevity and preventing chronic disease. And to do that, we need to have a change in body composition instead of just that number. That means we're looking at a loss of body fat potentially, if a person needs it, a loss of body fat, and an increase in muscle mass. And that balance, protecting muscle to protect and improve metabolic health moving forward, is absolutely crucial. Where that kind of body composition shift can also result in improving insulin resistance and minimizing the risk of heart disease and dementia and diabetes and all these things, where just straight up weight loss, the scale number moving, yes, you can have some improvements just with weight loss in health, but long term, especially if there's a lot of loss in muscle mass, people can still be metabolically unhealthy and at a normal scale weight.
Yeah, and I think what's really important there is, as we change this body composition, you talk about health promoting body composition change, the reductions in body fat. It's not just the subcutaneous under the skin body fat that we see, but also the really negative impact of visceral body fat. Can you speak a little bit to that in terms of the link to the chronic diseases you outlined?
Yeah. So when we gain body fat, we originally store it in what's called subcutaneous fat. That's the fat underneath our skin, the fat that we hate, that we don't like on the beach in our bikini, right? That's not inherently bad, but everyone has kind of their own threshold of subcutaneous fat. And if we continue adding fat to our body, then that can kind of spill over essentially and kind of move into around our organs, which is called visceral fat. But then we have it end up infiltrating into organs like our liver, pancreas, muscles, and that's called ectopic fat. This fat around the organ and within the organs causes inflammation. This is what causes insulin resistance and all these leading to chronic diseases. It's not really the actual subcutaneous fat. It's the ones that kind of the fat that seeps over into and around the organs that's really detrimental. And that's when we're talking about health promoting body composition shifts. Just moving that number on the scale might not necessarily alter or prevent or stop this visceral and ectopic fat from occurring or trying to minimize it. We really need to prioritize losing body fat and maintaining or improving muscle mass for us to move the needle.
Right. So I think that really clearly gives us a concrete goal to start talking about from a nutrition standpoint then. So yeah. I come to you, I want to lose weight. We have this conversation. Okay, I need to reduce body fat. I need to improve my visceral body fat. Now, what are my strategies that we're going to try and put in place to reduce body fat, maintain or improve lean muscle?
I do want to clarify how that fat deposits around our organ and into our organs is there's an issue with energy balance. Essentially, we're overnourishing, we're over-consuming calories. That's typically what is causing us to build an excess of fat that then seeps into organs. And so nutrition is very closely tied to this. And when we talk about reversing that or trying tactics to try to minimize this visceral fat, the fact that overconsumption is the major driving factor, we have to really take a look at energy balance as a major thing to shift and change and make sure that we're eating enough calories, not too little, not too much, to really stop this influx of fat storage essentially around our organs. That's where I would say would be the very first step is the energy balance equation.
And I think this is where a lot of the confusion over strategy and tactics comes in. You know, strategy number one, energy balance. How we achieve that, right? If we have to be in a negative or positive calorie balance, now we can start looking at, are you low carb? Are you intermittent fasting? These are all just tactics to achieve that first piece of that, right?
Absolutely. So when I it's not in fashion, I guess you want to say restrict your calories, right? Nobody wants to talk about it, but that's ultimately, I know there's very mixed messaging online about energy balance and calories or overconsumption of calories being the cause of these kind of chronic conditions or adiposity, so fat accumulation in the body. But you can't have a increase of fat or even a decrease of fat without us adjusting calories.
Right.
Like that's just science.
Right. That's just, the laws of thermodynamics, right?
The laws of physics.
Yeah.
So how we go about doing that is different for everybody. And I'm saying it, I also don't want to say it in a very, to make it seem easy. The information is easy, right? Okay, we just got to decrease calories. That's not easy to do, especially in our current environment. And there's so many factors that play a role into that. So when we talk about tactics, it really does have to be individualized. So, you know, to say to somebody, you just need to eat less food, or decrease your calories, it can be overwhelming. And so it's really important to find a strategy or a tactic that works for you. We can do that in various ways. We can do that just straight up calorie restriction, right? You calculate how many calories you need a day, you eat less. Some people are on board with that. They like tracking, like they just want to just go right for it. You know, other people might need to do a nutrient restriction, meaning low carb or low fat, or, something where they're minimizing certain components of food, that a lot of people think that it's the actual carbs or the actual nutrition that's causing them to the fat loss. It's not. It's just, if you're eliminating an entire food group, there's no way you're going to be able, you're basically eliminating tons of food that you can actually consume. And in effect, you're decreasing calories without even knowing it. It's the same with keto. It's the same with low carb. It's the same with any kind of restriction like that. You just are minimizing the types of food that you can eat, and you'll ultimately decrease calories. You can also do that with time restricted feeding or intermittent fasting, where you're eating in a certain allotment of time. This can be really helpful for people who don't want to think about calories, or they don't want to think about limiting specific food groups. They're just like, I'm just going to eat between these hours. And that usually works for some people because a lot of times people are overeating either in the evening or something to that effect. And that causes a calorie deficit. So most of these tactics, all of these tactics, even though they don't seem like they're decreasing calories, that's really what genuinely is happening. So it really, and all the studies and research shows at this point that there's not one superior way to go about doing this. There's no one superior diet. It really comes down to consistency and really what works for each individual. I mean, am I on board with things like the carnivore diet or even strict keto? Personally, I'm not. But if I had a client, which I do, I have a client that is the diet that works best for her. I have to meet clients where they are, but I feel like you have to meet yourself where you are, right, as well, and find really what works specifically for you. And that takes a lot of experimenting and trial and error. And I always tell clients, like, collect data, right? Like, collect data on yourself, what works, what doesn't work. And so there isn't one true tactic. We can deploy a bunch.
We haven't posted this episode yet, but I can already hear the comment section. And the outrage. So I think that what's really important here
just
is
talking about energy balance is going to cause a whole ruckus.
We're already into problematic territory here. And I think that's so important to address, is that when we look at these meta-analyses, which is the gold standard that we have right now for does something work, does it not, right? This is an accumulation of all the research run through statistical analysis together to increase the number of participants, give us the most certainty we can have. It's showing over and over again that this is the thing that comes out, right? And everybody can cherry pick articles. Everybody can read the headline that made it into the news media. If you only look at your viewpoint and the articles that prove your viewpoint, it's, yes, you can seem like you are on a very evidence-based nutrition plan, but the issue is you're conveniently ignoring all of the other stuff that's over here that's going to allow you to have a more balanced view of that, which is pick your tactic and achieve the strategy.
And I'm kind of simplifying it, saying, okay, just decrease calories. But kind of going back to where we started, as far as your ultimate goal, that will also give you a bit of an idea of kind of what tactics to maybe start with. If it's not, it really isn't. And especially when we're talking about health promoting body composition change. And, your question was, how do we decrease kind of like this visceral body fat? That definitely, the hierarchy of things is the calorie energy balance. But we also need to look at it from the perspective of, what else is going on? Each person is so individualized. So, do you have diabetes? Do you have a family history of heart disease? Then we have to bring into, strategic macronutrients and hitting micronutrient adequate targets, and that kind of difference between just a calorie restriction or just weight loss, which is basically, when we talk about weight loss, you just need a calorie restriction. I know I'm going to get so much hate for that, but that is really what is necessary. But if we're talking about health promoting body composition change, there needs to be more than just, yes, calorie restriction might be necessary to decrease visceral or ectopic fat, like we discussed. But we are also trying to maintain muscle mass. We are also trying to prevent chronic disease. So you do have to look beyond that too, into what do our meals look like as far as macronutrients. So things like carbohydrates, fats, and proteins.
So now we're sort of getting into stage 2 of our strategy, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to emphasize that we're building a multi-layered system here of how we think about this for health. So energy balance, are we at our desired energy balance to achieve our goal? And then within that, what does our nutrition look like? And this is where we start to focus on the macros, right?
Yes.
And so if I'm trying to maintain my lean mass, for example, how do we do that within this energy deficit?
Yeah. And I mean, that's definitely a conversation that I have a lot with clients. This kind of goes back to what I was saying about a very individualized approach, because in some cases, it might not be the best option to dive right into a calorie deficit, right? If we have somebody that is so under-muscled, or they haven't worked out a day in their life, it might not be the greatest option to throw them in a calorie deficit while we're trying to build muscle, right? Because our body really can't do that efficiently if we're not giving it the tools, aka energy or macro and micronutrients to build muscle. So, we could, in that, I mean, I don't know what direction you kind of want to go into, because each person is so different. So this is, outside of a calorie deficit that may or may not be appropriate at that time. One of the most important things to prioritize macronutrient wise is protein if we're trying to protect or build muscle. So whether we're having a calorie deficit, or where I like to start a lot of clients is at maintenance calories. So all our cells in our body require energy to function. Our brain cells, our skin cells, our heart cells, they need energy, and we get that energy from food. And every day, each individual person needs a certain amount of energy to have these cells function and cover your needs, to brush your teeth, to go for a walk, to do all the things for vital functions to happen. And that determines how much energy, aka calories, you need in a day. I typically try to have clients start at maintenance to see how it feels there. And your body is at its happiest where you're covering the amount of energy your body needs for the day to function, and you're not giving it too little and you're not giving it too much. And this is a happy place to be able to start building muscle as well. And a lot of times people don't even know where that is. So that's a good place to start. And then from there, we can say, okay, maybe we'll do a slight calorie deficit, just a couple of 100 calories. But while we're doing that, we want to prioritize protein. That's kind of like the second thing under whether we're in a calorie deficit or just trying to be at maintenance calories. And then we can.
And where should people be at from a calorie, from a protein standpoint? Are you giving them specific recommendations based on their body weight? Where do you sit with that?
Typically, I'll say the kind of gold standard right now is 1.6 per kilogram of body weight for protein. However, I like to bump that up even a little bit more, especially especially if we're in a calorie deficit. If we're in a calorie deficit, the main goal is to protect muscle at all cost. We might not be able to build muscle in a calorie deficit, but we want to maintain it. We don't want our body to basically utilize that as fuel when we're in a calorie deficit. So to have us decrease body fat and either maintain muscle mass or increase muscle mass, we need to make sure that we're having adequate amount of protein. And so I might bump that up during a calorie deficit phase. And it depends on the person. And I also like to do percentages of calories.
Yeah.
It depends. For women, the average woman that comes into my practice is usually consuming only around like 50, 60 grams of protein a day. That is very inadequate.
Right.
So without even giving like specific targets, I'm like, can we just get to 100 grams a day? That's like a very good general guideline for women, where, if we can just get there, and not even that, it's like, okay, can we just maybe start with breakfast and hit a protein target there? I typically like most people to be at least 30 grams of protein at each meal.
Yeah.
That's very rare to be happening at breakfast. So we can look at protein from that different angle.
So what would 30 grams of protein in actual food look like in my breakfast?
It's a lot more than people think, right? I have women all the time that are like, well, I eat eggs. Well, 2 eggs only has about like 14 grams of protein, right? If that, unless like a large egg. So it's definitely not enough. You can add, I shared with you my breakfast sausage. I just make my own like chicken or turkey patty sausages. You can do like 3 or 4 ounces of that will hit your target. You can do a protein shake in the morning. It definitely needs to be a mixture of some combination of foods, usually, if you're not going down like the supplement route or protein powder route. But it really takes thought and preparation beforehand. It's definitely easier to hit that target at lunch and more so at dinner. Breakfast is where most people do fall short, and it takes a little bit of planning to achieve that.
Yeah, that was a big change that we made. I've typically been a smoothie breakfast person, but would always be really hungry pretty quick again. And one of the key things that I've learned from you, I think been reminded by you, is the importance of whole food. Not only drinking a load of protein shakes all day, but actually eating the protein itself, and having to chew and digest and.
And that, I think we forget that too. Often the attention is on, well, I'm hitting this target. I've hit 100 grams, which is great. You technically are giving your body what it needs, but food and what works for each individual person, we can't underestimate the importance of actually digesting food, of actually being satiating, or food being enjoyable and satisfying. Where I do have clients that like don't even want to think about food in the morning. They have a shake, it fills them, they're good to go. I am not one of those people. My brain is like, okay, yeah, you gave us everything, but technically we didn't get food. Like that's kind of like what my brain does, right? For me to feel full long into or up until lunch, I really need to actually physically eat food. And that's different for each person. And that satisfaction is crucial, absolutely crucial, because in a smoothie, like you said, you might be getting enough of everything. You might be putting enough fiber in there, enough protein in there, but like your brain's like, we didn't eat anything, right? So the importance, not just the satisfaction piece, but really understanding how food makes you feel, because if you're doing a smoothie and it's not filling, you're kind of bypassing the also benefit of eating protein, which is that it is the most satiating and the most filling macronutrient. And so when we add that to meals, it keeps you full longer, which is what we want. We don't want you to feel like you need to be snacky and stuff like that in between meals. So eating an efficient amount of protein in food form slows down digestion. It takes a while for it to digest and makes you feel really full compared to a smoothie. So if you're trying out a smoothie, yes, you're hitting your target, fantastic, but that might not last for you. So you might have to switch it up. And or what I do is I make it into a smoothie bowl where I put a crap ton of ice in it. So I actually have to use a spoon to physically eat it. And that makes a huge difference too. Because again, your brain's like, or at least my brain is like, oh, okay, she's actually eating something versus just drinking something. But that is each individual person. That's where the testing process and experimenting on yourself comes into play.
I think for me, the biggest change that I noticed when we added those into our breakfast, first of all, they're delicious, and we will put the recipe in the show notes.
Okay.
But
they're great.
It was on the calorie side, right? So that second tier, the hit your protein and hit your protein as food, allowed me to better achieve the energy balance piece. Because I think that's, to your point, where I was falling down, was getting my protein and all these nutrients in the shake, but because I was hungry again an hour or two later, I'm actually now snacking before lunch. And then sort of there's a cascade there where now I'm actually overeating, even though I'm sort of hitting my target and thinking I'm doing quite well.
And that's often what I see a lot is, especially with women, that they have this mentality of, okay, well, if I eat less, this is going to help me lose weight. And so their meals are so minimal, or they're just having a salad that's not really balanced. And that leads to exactly what you said. It's not filling, it's not satisfying. And so they're snacking the rest of the day, or, they're over consuming at dinner or at night. And you might not realize it in the moment, but all those little snacks or overconsumption add up, where when you actually, my goal for clients, what I say all the time, because even when it comes to portions, when we talk about protein and we talk about things in the meal, that really is an individualized thing. Also, is what works for you at breakfast might not work for somebody else at all. And so the ultimate goal is your meal balanced well enough that you don't even think about food until lunch. Right. And then you eat a well-balanced lunch, and you don't even, depending on the time between those meals. But, that's kind of the ultimate goal. The goal is not to just eat the most minimal amount and then hope you get to lunch because you want to decrease calories. And that just takes a mindset shift and kind of moving away from this weight loss mentality to I'm fueling my body properly, which you can do and achieve body composition goals at the same time.
And so that rounds up nicely then with calories. We're talking about modest change one way or the other there, and not extreme calorie restriction, as you were just alluding to. We're hitting our protein target. Talk to me a little bit about the importance of fiber.
Right. In the same context of protein, when we eat enough fiber in our meals, it's also very filling. And so I always say this all the time. I'm like, if you're eating enough fiber and protein at a meal, you are going to be full and satisfied until the next meal. So that in and of itself is a huge benefit to adding fiber. Outside of that, when we add fiber to our meals, we are feeding our microbiome, the little gut bugs in there that we want to essentially feed. You're essentially giving them, I like to think of fiber as like their multivitamin.
Right.
And so you're feeding them, which then in turn, they help us create a wonderful environment and obvious health benefits when we have good gut health. And preventing of colon cancer. There's so many benefits to fiber, but no one really is meeting this target either. So
Right,
it's one of those things. I honestly think it's like 3% of
3%.
Americans. I really think it's
Wow.
only 3% of people are actually meeting fiber needs.
So why? What are some of the sources of fiber? How are we missing out on this?
I mean, not to throw more statistics, but I think it's only like 10 or 12% of people are meeting their fruit and vegetable targets daily. So that right there plays a huge role in that. It's not easy.
Right.
Most people don't like vegetables, or we're not taught growing up how to prep or cook them. There's a lot of skills that are required to kind of have these foods being in your day to day, a lot of planning and prep when it comes to these types of foods. And so that is a major reason why we're kind of missing the mark on fiber. We can get fiber from beans. Not many people are adding beans and legumes to their diet, nuts and seeds, whole grains. So, most of our diet is consisting of right now very ultra processed, low fiber foods. I mean, about 70% of most American diet is ultra processed foods.
Right.
So they're devoid of fiber and nutrients and that type of thing. So that's kind of why we're deficient in the fiber.
Yeah. And so you mentioned some of those sources, beans, nuts, vegetables. Mm-hmm. I guess what are some easy ways? We sort of talked about one tactic with protein. What are some easy ways that I can start improving my fiber intake right away?
I try to tell clients to pick a meal, and can we add a vegetable to that meal? It's for multiple reasons. You don't want to just wake up tomorrow eating 25 grams of fiber. Like, you will be it'll not be pleasant. It's going to be really uncomfortable. So regardless of whether you are hitting that target or not, we want to do it slowly and gradually. Mm-hmm. So, I'm always like, okay, let's just pick a meal. Let's pick dinner or lunch or breakfast or whatever that is, and try to have a vegetable every dinner. Do that for 30 days. Like, even that alone can be difficult because, like I was saying, the skills and planning that's necessary for that, you have to develop it as a skill, right? You test out. I also suggest, picking a vegetable, whether that's like, say, I'm going to pick asparagus, and then searching for recipes to make that asparagus in multiple different ways. Like, this month is asparagus month, and I'm going to make it in multiple different ways, or I'm going to test out roasting it, or I'm going to test out air frying it.
Right.
And kind of, making it a little bit more fun and experimental. And knowing going into it, there are going to be fails. There are going to be things that you hate, things that you love. But that's really the important thing, is finding things that you really enjoy and like. That kind of goes with the vegetable piece. When it comes to like beans and legumes, a lot of people have a very low tolerance for them. I hear often that a lot of people feel uncomfortable. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying about low and slow. So if you want to start implementing those things, adding them to recipes, small amounts, doing that over a couple of weeks, and then gradually increasing it. Because essentially what's happening is you're giving certain types of fiber that feed our microbes. But if you haven't been doing that, and you haven't been really taking care of the good guys in your gut, there might not be enough in there to kind of help you process that fiber.
Oh, interesting.
And that's going to cause a lot of discomfort. And so you kind of have to give your gut a little bit of time to repopulate those guys that can tackle a lot of that. And just other producing digestive enzymes that can tackle those things. It's a gradual process. If you continue providing the body that with that fiber, it's like, okay, she's now going to give us this all the time. So we need to adapt. Right. We need to be able to release more enzymes to digest this, or your microbiome has to adapt. And that's why it's a gradual process.
And does it matter what kind of vegetable? Do they all have the same fiber, some more than others?
No, there are certain foods that we would consider a prebiotic. And when we say prebiotic, that basically means the food for your microbes. So I don't know if I should clarify. There's a prebiotic, there's probiotics, and then there's postbiotics. So the prebiotic is the food.
Mm-hmm.
Probiotics that you can just take, those are actual live microbes. You're getting probiotics in yogurt or kimchi or in a probiotic supplement. You're actually taking bacteria and hoping that they stay in your gut and live there. But they won't live there or hang out there if we don't feed them properly.
Right.
And that's where prebiotics come in. And you can take prebiotic supplements now. I often suggest that in the interim when, it's a difficult thing for people to start adding vegetables and these things in. And then there's postbiotics. So our microbes eat our fiber and they release chemicals and things from that. I like to say they're pooping, which is kind of gross, but it makes people laugh and then they can't stop thinking about it. So, and these are beneficial to the health of our gut lining. And we're finding out more and more the health and benefit of other systems in our body. So those are the three differences. So when we talk about the food for the microbes, we're looking at certain types of vegetables and foods, things like blueberries, asparagus. I mean, there's definitely certain foods that feed the microbiome, but I don't really like to go into the weeds with that because one, we're not even eating enough to begin with. And the other fiber that's really not technically a prebiotic fiber is still beneficial for our gut and kind of helping things move along in our gut well. So really the key message is just diversity. Once you kind of start getting used to adding, more fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, beads and legumes and stuff like that into your diet, the diversity of plant foods, and those things are all plants. And so really prioritizing the diversity and eating of different vegetables, different types of things is really where it's going to be beneficial instead of just saying, I'm going to eat this specific thing because it's a prebiotic fiber, because they are all beneficial.
Right. That's a really great summary of sort of the physical components of nutrition, right? So we've got our energy balance, we've got our protein, we've got our fiber, and what's going to come with that is all the micronutrients, right? So all the phytochemicals, all the vitamins and minerals and all that stuff. The other element I just want to touch on is, I think the most complex part of nutrition is the psychology of food. We have all got some sort of emotional attachment, some emotional stuff around our food, so the behavior change that's associated with adding vegetables or cutting calories or wasting food. How many kids weren't allowed to leave the table until they'd finished what was on their plate?
Yeah.
And so overconsumption is this deeply psychological thing that we carry with us. How do you go about addressing that?
Yeah, that's hard. And honestly, I think that is where I spend the most of my time with clients, honestly, because, you can get the best plan, the best science, the best data, I could hand you the best nutrition plan on the planet. But life happens. And oftentimes you can't implement that plan. And so it becomes outside of actually hiring a dietitian or a coach to kind of walk you through that. It's just really becoming aware that there's going to be roadblocks and finding out what those roadblocks are for you. I always tell clients, if there's friction if you're trying to implement a habit or you're trying to do something and it just seems impossible, like there's friction, there's something there, really ask yourself what is going on, right? If you are finding yourself snacking when you get home from work and you don't understand why and you can't stop, really think about, okay, what's really going on? Am I emotional from the day and I'm using food as a tool to help me feel better? Or is it a habit? Or is it just this is my environment? It's really important to kind of get really clear on, and oftentimes that is hard to do with yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So I do advocate for getting help or finding a coach or finding somebody that can actually help you work through those things. Especially when it comes to, I do talk to a lot of women that have a lot of things that have happened in their childhood, or, a lot of dieting history or emotions around food that really do need to be worked through, and can absolutely prevent you from reaching goals. It's not, and almost never just about the food. There's always something potentially behind the scenes that could be preventing you from reaching your goals. And the first step is to identifying those and then finding ways to kind of work through them.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. A lot of the people that I deal with, certainly my one-on-one clients, a lot of women coming to me in their 60s, 70s with an osteoporosis diagnosis. And invariably, there has been a lot of guilt and shame around food in their life, and a lot of encouragement to eat and exercise to be thin, not to maintain lean mass, bone mass, maintain healthy body fat levels. So I think the importance of addressing this for women in particular, I do see men dealing with this a lot, but women in particular seem to have a huge societal pressure on them and food, essentially.
I try to have my clients, specifically female clients, think of themselves as an athlete. And as females, we have been bombarded with a lot of diet industry messaging. And that is eat less, move more. Moving more is mostly crap tons of cardio, and so even just that in and of itself, that mindset shift of, no, I want to be strong. I want to build muscle. But in the context of that, it is going to help me look and feel lean and feel really good and strong in my body, but it's also going to help me prevent chronic disease. And so that's really difficult, because even still today, you go online and it's very, very overwhelming, the information of seeing before and afters and quick fixes, and and that's kind of why I hesitate even talking about calorie restrictions,
right?
Because that's kind of like the messaging that we're constantly bombarded with as females. And so a lot of work that I do with clients as well is this mentality shift. Just takes time. I mean, think about even unknowingly the messaging we're getting from TV shows and commercials, and we need to look a certain way. And specifically this age group of most of the women that I work with, of, it's wrong to age, or it's wrong to look a certain way. And really changing our focus, that takes work. That's almost like a skill in and of itself, to be able to think about it from the perspective of like, no, I want to be strong. I still want to look and feel sexy. Absolutely. But I'm going to do it in a way like F the diet industry, right? I'm going to do it in a way that's health promoting. But that definitely takes time to shift the mindset on that. That's crucial.
Yeah, I think the mindset shift I see is when people get scared with that diagnosis, right? They come to me and they've got osteoporosis. And now we're starting to lift weights. Now we're starting to have conversations about, are you getting sufficient calories to maintain your bone mass? I think what I am trying to encourage people earlier and earlier and earlier is don't be on a diet and exercise plan that mortgages your future. If we're just constantly underfueled, we're just stripping away the muscle mass, stripping away the bone mass. That's going to leave you in a really compromised position going into later life. And just the stat alone that if you fall and fracture your hip, the average life expectancy after that is 6 months. Now, that is entirely preventable. And with my people who come to me with osteoporosis, we start then the fall prevention program, because there's sort of two sides of it. You've got to fall and hit your hip to have the fracture. And so if we can build the strength around that, we might not get your bone density back to optimal levels, but we can sure as hell make it harder for you to fall down. And so there's hope for everyone, but every podcast, it seems like I'm preaching on get early, early start.
Oh, absolutely. I do want to mention too that, kind of what you're along the lines of what you're saying is oftentimes the messaging, specifically with dieting, is that you're just in a calorie deficit forever and you need to work out ridiculously and you need to be and restrict your food forever. Like that is very far from what is necessary. Mm-hmm. Going back to what I was saying about maintenance and staying at maintenance, you want to stay at maintenance the majority of the time.
Right.
And only go into fat loss phases sporadically and very in specific purposeful times. Mm. Like I didn't have one single client that's been in a fat loss phase during the holidays, right? They're all at maintenance, that doesn't make sense to do it then. Right. And why that's important is because exactly what you said, your body hates being in a calorie deficit. It will do everything possible to fight you. And for that reason, it thinks it's not getting enough energy for all the cells and things in your body to function. And we need to be eating enough, not just macronutrients, but like you mentioned, micronutrients to make sure that we're protecting bone density, to protect muscle, and to provide the body enough nutrients to just have great energy. Mm-hmm. And that does require fueling yourself properly and actually eating enough calories and tying that to the diet messaging. That often I see, women specifically just doing these diets and men too. Yeah. They're just like striving for this specific number on the scale. And really that can be very detrimental to exactly what you said. Mm-hmm. If we're thinking about the risk of falling and the risk of, the increase of mortality from that, and the same thing with being independent late in life.
Right.
When we talk about just a drop in weight and we're losing muscle mass and, I just hear women all the time really focused on this very specific number. And it's so tied emotionally for emotional reasons. And we need to kind of pull away from that and really say, okay, but ultimately, what do you want? Because I think I mentioned to you and Michelle about this before, like nobody wakes up every day saying, I want to lose weight today, right? But if you want to wake up every day and set an example for your kids, or you want to live a long, healthy life, that requires you moving away from this harsh diet mentality and really prioritizing things like bone density and muscle mass and all these things that prevent chronic disease. And that means that you should be eating in the way that
Right.
we kind of talked about.
Now, I know that this is a real specialty of yours and a direction that you're moving your whole business in. I really want to touch on today some of the factors just as at a high level, but again, I'll emphasize we are going to do an episode on this.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the considerations for women going through menopause, perimenopause?
Yeah, one of the main things is we talk about it being the menopausal transition during this time of life, but I really like to tell clients that it's also a health transition. What's happening is we're having, like Cliff Notes version, we are having a decrease in reproductive hormones. But these hormones do much more than just helping us with our reproductive years. There are receptors on all cells of the body for these hormones. And so they impact all areas of the body: brain health, gut health, muscle health. And so as these hormones decrease, we are seeing issues with these systems naturally when you've just spent the majority of your life having access to these hormones, helping these processes. And so a lot of women don't realize this, or we're not really taught this. We just think, oh, these hormones are because we get our period and so we can have babies, but they actually influence almost every system of the body.
Right.
So when they decrease, a lot of these systems start to not function as well. And it can lead us to be more at risk for chronic diseases. Things like insulin resistance. We now will hold our weight in different areas. Like before, our fat would accumulate around our thighs. Now it will accumulate around our midsection, which can then lead to depositing fat in and around our organs, which we already talked about we don't want. So in a nutshell, we are seeing the increase of these physiological changes in our body that leads us to be more at risk for these chronic diseases than we were before. And there's certainly a lot of things that we can do to, it's not hopeless, right? We're not like, well, oh crap, now we're at higher risk for dementia. There are things that we can do, nutrition and lifestyle wise, and prioritizing and improving metabolic health to balance out these things that are happening.
Yeah. I've found it to be staggering, just going through this with Michelle over the years, the lack of education, not only for women going through this, but for medical professionals. Our good friend, Dr. Kelly Casperson, had a great line in one of the talks that she did. If men's testicles dropped off when they were 45, there would be a vaccine.
Oh my gosh.
That wouldn't happen.
Seriously.
It's like my favorite line I've ever heard in a talk. It's so true.
I love that so much. It's startling. I think the reason why I became so passionate about this area is, I specialize in women's health and more focusing on this menopausal transition, but I do work with a lot of women who are trying to get pregnant, who are pregnant. And it was, even my own personal experience, I don't think I fully, and I went through a ton of anatomy and physiology classes. I went through like crazy science classes in school. And I don't think it was until like my 30s did I fully understand how the reproductive cycle works. And I was like violently angry when I was like, how did I not know this my whole entire life? Are you kidding me?
Right.
And I'm not alone. I think the majority, almost I would say 90% of the women that I talk to, even early women who are trying to get pregnant, have no like full idea of how we even ovulate or our hormonal cycles each month and how that influences our emotions and how we eat and how we live life, right? And then going into menopause, it's such a huge transition. And we already don't even know fully what we were going through month to month, in our reproductive years. Now we're kind of thrown into this like utter chaos with like hormonal chaos. And so it's even more confusing. And so I think that that's why I'm beyond passionate about this, because the education piece is huge. How do we not have classes about this and we don't know this when, and to think about it from the perspective of every woman, literally, if you were born with ovaries, you are going to go through menopause. Mm-hmm. If you live long enough, like if we're lucky to live long enough, every female will go through this. And whether that's surgically induced, whether that's naturally, gone through menopause. And we don't know a lot about it. Like, how is that even possible?
Right. And not only will every woman, like every woman in history has. Right. Yes. It's not like this is a new thing that's just happening. So yeah, I'm really excited to dive into that with you. And we're going to do a series on this with Michelle leading on that. So super excited for that and really appreciative of your work on it.
Everyone should turn into that one, because it's going to be.
Yes. It's going to be awesome. Together. And then just to wrap here, Erika, I really appreciate your time that you've given us today. What are some of the common myths, or is there anything we haven't covered today that you'd like to address, that you hear from your clients a lot, that you think the listeners would benefit from?
Let's see. I mean, I think more. I could definitely talk on very specific topics. I think what I would want to say is, more about the messaging online and what to be weary of, right? We kind of already talked about things kind of getting to a point where it's like cultish or very tribal when it comes to nutrition and things. So I always try to express to clients and to others that, be very careful about where you're getting your information online. And I know that's really hard to kind of decipher through during this time, but, usually if someone is very tribal or very like, this is the way, like we already kind of talked about, there's not one single superior diet. There's not one superior tactic. And so if somebody is online kind of saying things are toxic, or this seed oils are going to kill you, or carbs are the worst, or run in the different direction, right? You want to look out for experts that have credentials in their field. I'm not even saying that matters all the time or that makes a difference. I mean, there's what do you want to call it? There's just bad eggs in every profession too. So you have to be careful even when you are looking for an expert. But usually finding content from an expert is usually boring. And so kind of avoid this like flashy rules kind of people. That's what I would say as like major advice. I think I would also say carbs are not the devil.
Wait,
I would
what?
say that too. Wait.
How's it taking us so long to get to this?
Carbs are not the devil. And they do not cause you to be fat unless you overconsume calories. Let's just establish that. Right. I mean, I think, we probably could have went down a little bit deeper into the energy balance piece, and to say that, if you are over consuming calories in any food, you're going to gain weight. If you decrease calories and you're eating anything, you're going to decrease weight. That is just the way of the world, what happens. Right. And so if you're eating, say I need 2,000 calories a day, like all my cells require 2,000 calories to function energy, and I eat 2,500 calories, my body has to decide, oh, she's giving us 500 extra calories. We need to store that. Irregardless of whether that was 500 calories from McDonald's or 500 calories from broccoli, your body does not care. It's like, oh, there's extra energy. Now, I'm probably going to get major hate saying this. There's
So much
nuances.
hate. So
There's
much hate.
nuances to this. Obviously, 500 calories of broccoli, I might not absorb all that because there's fiber and.
I challenge you to eat 500 calories of broccoli.
Listen, I did this calculation because I was trying to prove a point to a client, this very, very specific point, that if you need 2,000 calories a day, right? And kind of tying that to why that might be difficult, because I have a lot of clients that will say this too, that they're like, yeah, but I feel like I'm not eating anything already. And it's oftentimes because we're eating a lot of processed high calorie foods. And so I kind of thought, I'm like, okay, what's 2,000 calories of, like, say you go to McDonald's. Okay, so if you go to McDonald's and I'm using me as an example, I need 2,000 calories to be at maintenance. And I eat a Big Mac. I think I totaled it. It was a Big Mac, 2 large fries, and a large Coke is 2,000 calories. I could be totally wrong.
And that's a meal.
It might be,
right? But within variance, that's a meal.
Yeah. That is, so basically, if I just ate that the whole day, whether it was McDonald's or not, I'm at maintenance. I'm not going to lose weight and I'm not going to gain weight. I'm going to feel like crap and I'm probably going to be hungry, right? But I'm going to be starving. And then I compared it. I was like, okay, what would 2,000 calories of broccoli be? And I think I totaled it. I think it was like 64 cups of broccoli. So just like I can't even imagine eating like multiple cups of broccoli. But this is just my point, is that oftentimes when someone is saying, I feel like I'm not eating enough, how easy in our environment today it is to go over our calorie needs in day to day. It's very easy to do that versus, if we're eating whole foods, it's really hard to do that. It's impossible to eat 64 cups of broccoli
in a week.
Insane. I mean, that's like totally crazy. Yeah. But my point being that if I was over consuming, whether I had 520, like say I ate 2,500 calories instead of 2,000 calories of McDonald's versus 2,500 calories of broccoli, my body is not going to be like, oh, you ate broccoli, so we're not going to turn that into fat.
Right.
Or, like that's not what happens.
Right.
So
exactly.
Regardless, and I'm tying that to the carbohydrate thing, because oftentimes people will associate, well, I cut carbs and I lost weight. Mm-hmm. Well, when you cut carbohydrates, do you know how many foods you have to cut out of your diet?
Right.
To do that? And you just ultimately decrease calories. So it's not necessarily the carbohydrates. Now, I will say, in the context of, there might be specific scenarios where we might have to restrict calorie or carbohydrates, not keto level restrict, but a certain percentage of calories. If you have insulin resistance, if we're trying to minimize liver fat, there's certain,
but against specific goals. Right?
Yes, for specific reasons.
What's your goal, and we will decide your strategy from there, and your tactics. So one final question that I think people are really dying to know about. Can you talk to us about Legos?
Oh my God. I love them.
Yeah, you do. Any specific kind?
No, any kind. I mean, the obsession is real. I don't care what kind. I love them. I love the Lego.
The bigger, the better.
If I had to start, if I want to start a YouTube channel to talk about nutrition, right? Like that's an ultimate goal. But like if someone was like, you can make a YouTube channel about literally anything, it would be like just me sitting building Legos and like chatting with other people who want to build Legos.
Well, maybe we could combine the two.
Can you show I'm any more of a nerd already? Yeah. I just admitted that openly on a podcast.
On a podcast, yeah. And Erika, where can people find you? You're a font of knowledge, and so I'd love people to be able to get in touch.
Well, I have an Instagram page just at Erika Hoffmaster. I have a goal to actually start posting on there this year. So
Right.
I know you and Michelle will hold me to that.
Yes, we will.
So yes, I'm not big on social media, as everyone who's in my life is aware. So that is a goal this year, to spread actual resources and knowledge to the masses.
Awesome. And
Nonsense.
you have a website?
It's just erikahoffmaster.com.
erikahoffmaster.com. Great. But we will put both of those in the show notes so people can hold you accountable to your social media goals.
I start getting messages like,
yeah,
why aren't you posting?
Yeah, exactly. Those will be the messages, not cups of the devil.
I know. That's so true. I need it though. I need it.
Yes.
And I'm very lucky and blessed that most of my clients are word of mouth and physician referrals. And I've built a great community where people find me, not even through social media, but I do know that I need to get sound information, nutrition information out into the interwebs.
Yes, you do. And on that, we will wrap. Thank you again so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Vitality Collective podcast. Here's what we uncovered about conscious nutrition. Nutrition isn't about joining a dietary tribe or following a one-size-fits-all approach. It's about understanding your unique goals, whether that's improving health span, achieving performance gains, or optimizing body composition. Aligning your nutrition strategy to meet those goals is what's important. We talked about the importance of energy balance, prioritizing protein and fiber for satiety and metabolic health, and focusing on whole foods to fuel your body effectively. And remember, it's not just about the food, it's about mindset. Conscious nutrition means crafting a personalized, sustainable approach that fits your life. Don't forget to subscribe for more episodes designed to empower your vitality. Until next time, eat with purpose and stay curious.